Hi everyone, welcome to Tim Burbage Reads. My name's Tim. I'm going to tell you about a book I read, and it's Magician by Raymond E. Feist. So this is originally published in the 80s. I read an updated edition, which was updated in 1991, where I think basically the series had become successful, so he was allowed to go back and put in all the stuff that he had cut, things like that. This is the first book of the Rift War cycle, which covers a trilogy, and it's part of the Rift War series, which is like 30 books or something crazy. This book, when it was published in the States, was split into two: Magician Apprentice and Magician Master, I think. But in the UK, it was just published in one, and the Kindle version that I have is just one book. So it's a fantasy book, and it's a bit mental. So one thing that came out when reading the introduction and Raymond E. Feist kind of explaining this new edition was that this was the first book he'd ever written, and so he didn't know the rules of writing fantasy. And I think that's a fair summation, because this book is but wild. This is in the era of fantasy that I've kind of read a few of, which is obviously this is someone's D&D game was the inspiration, and Tolkien is still very much hanging over everything. But this book I thought was really interesting. First of all, we have the first 100 odd pages follows. The main character is a boy called Pug. That's a strong, interesting name to pick for your main character. Pug. Like the little dog. And we follow how he is in a town, and everyone in town gets assigned jobs, and he doesn't become apprentices. And those who don't basically run off to join the Navy, or go and join fishing boats and things like that. And he gets picked to be an apprentice magician by the town wizard. So I thought, okay, cool. And the start of the book, you follow adventures of Pug as he meets the princess-style character, his best friend. They're going in different paths. One's a magician, one's a fighter. He's kind of learning about magic. He's finding it troubling. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm starting to get the hang of this. Then aliens turn up. Which is great. And I think that's where the Rift War comes in, because they come in through a rift. And they're not aliens, they're not little green men with antennas poking out of their heads, but they are different people from a different planet. So that's where I'm going to kind of stop the pretense, and that's as far as I'm going to go in terms of spoilers. But yeah, and the book kind of goes from there. And you think, every time I was reading this, and I was like, cool, I think I've got this figured out now, it would change and almost become a completely different book. You go from, okay, this is about a young boy learning how to do magic. That stops. Okay, it's about a country trying to defend itself from invasion. And it gets very, I would say, as someone who hasn't read a ton of military fiction, it gets quite military in it. It's about fighting, it's about a campaign, it's about resources, it's about sieges, it's about battles. Okay, and then it takes another complete change, and it becomes about court intrigue and who's the power behind the throne, and who's on the throne, and who's going to be king or queen or whatever, and and then it becomes, actually we're going to learn about this completely different civilization and how they work, and then we're going to it goes back to, he's trying to learn how to do magic, but in a completely different way. And then back into more battles. And then also one of the characters is being possessed by this thing from the past, to whatever ends. Who knows? But he is changed. There's just so much in this book. There's so much in it. It's just a bit bonkers. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed all of the elements individually, mostly. Um, some of them I enjoyed more than others, I think it's fair to say. And one thing as well is the pacing in this book. It's like a 880 something pages. It's a chonker, and I kind of had to read it gradually over time. I wasn't like blazing through it. I think it's quite rare to blaze through a 900 page book, but pacing was an issue. Things would slow down, and then you jump to another character, and you hadn't read about them for 200 and 300 pages. It was not an even like, oh, let's go back and forth, let's go back and forth. Like, it wasn't chopped up and edited in a way like a TV show where you constantly have an A and B plot and you kind of go between them. It was let's follow this character for almost like the equivalent of a book, small novel, like 200, 300 pages. Okay, let's just drop them and then move on to the next one, and we might come back to them, but you would have forgotten what happened to them. Let's follow this character for the next 150, 200 pages. Okay, now let's go back to this person. You know, it was a bit all over the place. But in terms of big fantasy genre series, this year I've read this, and I also read the opening of The Wheel of Time, The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. Everyone on YouTube, BookTube, talks about The Wheel of Time. Very few, if any, talk about The Rift War Cycle by Raymond Feist. Why is that? So far, I'm one book in. It's not very far in the journey. This is way better. Like, this is far more enjoyable to read. Like, I think about... So this is like 800 pages odd. Eye of the World is probably about 600-700 pages, but similar length. This book takes place, I think, over 9 years. That's another thing. There's huge time jumps. They're like, oh, this thing happens to this character. And then, like, we come back and it's like, it's been 5 years and this person has been stuck here. And this is how they've changed. I think Eye of the World takes place over, like, a month of them walking. So much happens in this book. It's just bonkers. And so I want to read more of this. Why is Wheel of Time bigger than Magician on BookTube anyway? Maybe it's because the Wheel of Time gets better and better and better and better and better, which I think probably is the case. Maybe the Rift War Cycle Saga, whatever, decreases in quality. It may be due to the fact that Raymond Feist kind of cranked them out every year, and they kind of stopped. Or maybe because there is a certain age demographic of people who talk on BookTube about books, and all of them read The Wheel of Time when they were teenagers, and none of them read Magician when they were teenagers. I don't know, but I gave this 4 stars. I did enjoy it. The pacing was all over the place. I see why they split it into 2 books. I think this is as long. I got the trilogy on my Kindle, and I think I've read 1 book of the 3, and I'm like 45% of the way through the trilogy. So I think the size of the book shrinks from here on in, and maybe there's a bit more focus on what characters we're going to follow and how much we're going to follow them. But I really like this. I'm halfway through the year, and I've tried to read a different fantasy book every month. Which fantasy books am I going to pick out one to continue with? This is certainly up there. I'm certainly interested in reading the second one of this cycle. Let's see how it goes. So yeah, it's 4 stars from me. I enjoyed it. Put down in the comments below what you thought of Magician, and also why is this series kind of forgotten about from a fantasy BookTube perspective, because everyone just talks all the time about the Wheel of Time, and no one talks about this. So I'm interested in that. Anyway, I'll see you later. Get out of my house!